Lights, camera, action. We have Marc Meyers with us today.
Good morning.
Emerging. Can we use the word emerging filmmaker now, or no? You're now becoming sort of a superstar in a sense, right?
I don't know if you can say emerging if you're bald.
Oh, that's true. You
Yeah.
can't say emerging when you're bald.
Right. Yeah.
But how many features are we in now? We're in number 5, 6, or
Seven, I
seven
think, maybe.
features. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. There
I've
you
had
go.
5 in a row in the last couple of years,
On
few years. Yeah.
On a roll.
On a roll right now.
On a roll. So, tell me about what you're up to right now.
Right now, I'm in post on a film I'm doing for Universal called All My Life, and I'm just about to relocate post to California for the sort of back half of my director's cut and get ready for all the other finishing that comes with a movie. And I have 2 features about to come out. I have Human Capital with Liev Schreiber, Marisa Tomei Peter Sarsgaard, Alex Wolff, Maya Hawke, Asif Mandi, Paul Sparks, Betty Gabriel. They're all in this movie Human Capital that Oren Moverman wrote. That comes out March 20th. And then April, Good Friday, whatever that is, April something. Good Friday, We Summon the Darkness comes out, and that's a genre heavy metal pick that stars Johnny Knoxville, Alexandra Daddario, Maddie Hassan, Logan Miller. So I did a wild genre film after My Friend Dahmer, and then I immediately started directing Human Capital.
And thematically, these are all your scripts, or
Those are the first 2 that I didn't write.
Okay.
So after I did My Friend Dahmer, which I wrote and directed, I started looking for other scripts to sort of go again faster and not start from ground zero with a blank page. And those 2 that I attached to both happened. And then at the same time, I had chased this opportunity that I fell in love with this project called All My Life at Universal. And then right when I was finishing those and getting ready for Human Capital to premiere at TIFF, All My Life was greenlit. So right after Toronto, I flew to New Orleans and
no time,
and prepped, and then shot All My Life before Christmas.
And how much time did you have for prep?
Maybe it was 5 weeks. And when I first went down there was not even cast attached. It was just Jessica Roth was about to get attached. So when I walked into my new office in New Orleans, there was one headshot on the wall. So we were casting, location scouting, prepping, everything all at the same time.
Racing to the finish line.
Racing the finish line, get it all done before Christmas.
Let's wind back.
Okay.
Because you and I met in a funny way.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of a kind of an influence even for your career in a certain way, right?
Right.
Working at of all things, at Variety magazine in ad sales.
Yes.
Tell me about that job. I want to know about it, and also let's tally through it, because you've got a story that connects that to what happened. Tell me about that.
Well, let's start with the IFP.
IFP first.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And I think I might have known you at IFP. I just didn't have a corporate card to go get drinks at that point.
Yeah, but I had that, so I was able to take care of that part.
Right. I mean, somewhere along the line, honestly, like right after college, there's someone that said to me that there's only one job in this world, and that's sales. And so I was working as like a gopher at a small production company in New York, and someone there said, "Oh, I know someone that works at the IFP. Maybe you can go in there." And when I walked in there, they had an opportunity to start selling ads for the IFP market, which used to be called the IFFM. At the Angelica Film Center.
Angelica at that point.
Right.
Now, what year are we now? Hit me with the when that was. Was that in the 90s?
Yeah, mid-90s.
Mid-90s.
You know, I think it was, you heard about Troma had already been there with like the Toxic Avenger and things like that. So there was
Lloyd Kaufman.
Right. There was
wonderful.
a previous iteration of the wildness of the IFP market, or the IFFM at the Angelica. But this was my introduction to the independent film community completely, which was because I didn't know nothing and I didn't go to film school. I just was fascinated by movies or just trying to find my way.
What did you do before? Not to linger too much on school, but what did you do in college that would have led you to all of this?
Well, I was always messing around. I mean, I used to act in plays when I was a kid. But
okay, so you were in theater.
Yeah, I was in theater, and I went to acting camp when I was in high school, and would act in all the plays, and that was just always part of my life. But I think it occurred to me somewhere in high school after my freshman year doing a play that you can no longer get away with acting and smiling at the same time on stage. Like I think my acting was good as a kid. You know, I wasn't scared to be on stage, but I just grew more into being a writer. So I was writing ads right out of college, waiting tables, and then found this film production company that led me to the IFP. And from there, I was selling ads. And through selling ads, I started to meet people like you at Technicolor and other people that were providing services for the independent film community. And I was almost like, I didn't understand how to make a movie, but I started to learn all the services that provide for this void in the middle, which is the filmmaker. And so then after I sort of learned that for about a year or two and was selling ads and booths and sponsorships to the Gotham Awards, I sort of understood the entire New York organism, the film commissions, the Kodak, what an Avid was. I just started learning what all these things were. And then after about doing that for 2 years at the IFP, while I was also writing a lot of theater and small groups like the Ensemble Studio Theater in Cherry Lane, I took one of my
You were writing plays.
I was writing plays at the same time.
Very important. Okay, so the seed for writing was happening simultaneously to selling.
Yes.
Okay.
And so because of that, I then, after about 2 years of doing it, I took a 1-week class at the Rockport Film and Television Workshops.
Of course,
right?
Rockport, man.
Right.
Come on. Absolutely. Those were important workshops.
Yeah.
That was part of the foundation of opportunities to expose yourself at the time.
Right. Yeah. And you learn just the basic fundamentals in 1 week, which is like, you know, crossing the line and continuity and just directing angles. And I did that for a week. I came back and then I prepped to make my first short film, which was out of taking one of my one-act plays that had been on stage and then turn that into my first short film. And I started to, well, you make a short film up there. So I got to sort of see the whole journey within a week of how to make a short. And then I started making a couple shorts.
That wasn't Union Square, though, was it? That was before the...
Yeah, there were these shorts I made. This one that was like 7 pages of a feature-length screenplay that I wrote.
Oh, wow.
And then I did a movie on 35 millimeter black and white film called 86 Customer that was based on a one-act play that I had. Wow, you really... That was a while ago.
No, but the black and white thing, was that the backstory you told me about?
I did, yeah. So
tell me about how that happened.
Well, someone randomly from the West Coast called up the IFP and said, we have 16,000 feet of 35 millimeter black and white film. We'd like to donate it for a tax deduction. And Michelle Bird at the time said, we have no reason to have 35 millimeter film in the office. And so the receptionist happened to be a young burgeoning cinematographer. He told me about it. I said, I'll take care of it. I called the theater company that I was working with. I said, can you give me a tax ID number? Because I'd like to receive some 35 millimeter film. And then I paid for the FedEx and that was it. The next thing I know, I had 16,000 feet of 35 millimeter film.
Fantastic.
And I put it in my dad's apartment in his freezer. And then about a year later, I'd figured out how to get all the other pieces together. So we took over a restaurant on Cornelia Street for 4 days, and I turned that one-act film into my first short film.
Wow.
Yeah. So I found this DP, I think his name was Tom Agnello, and he was like a guy that rolled into town with like a good humor truck filled with film equipment. And he was just
he had a 35 actual camera, like an Arri or
something like that
or whatever.
And he had some dolly track, and he had a jib arm, and I just had to get a crew, and he just pulled everything you would need to make a movie was like in the back of his little good humor truck, and we just parked it there, and we took over this restaurant for 4 days.
That's awesome.
And so from there, I was able to...
It'd be pretty conservative, though, because that amount of film lasts 3 hours and change, right?
Right.
You know, I mean, it was not... I mean, it's a good amount of 35, but, 5,400 feet an hour. So,
yeah, but you go up to your actor and be like, you got 3 takes.
You got 3 takes.
You got 3 takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
So, but I was very meticulous about how I planned out the shot list for that and the themes that I had developed and how I was going to shoot it. And I started to sort of organize my thoughts on that. But then that allowed me to go back to all these relationships I had made at the IFP and go like, okay, now I shot this movie. I went to Do Art and got it developed. I went to Magno for the sound design. I found a sound designer to, bring it into Magno. A friend of mine who was an assistant editor, she got an Avid, and we found a room for the summer, and we cut it over the course of a summer. And I just sort of taught myself the workflow through doing it.
Amazing.
I guess. I guess that's how we all do it one way or the other. You know? You just got to do it.
You got to do it.
You got to just do it.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
And
the short film
was
10 minutes too long. Like, if I looked at it now, I'd be like, oh, God, this should be 10 minutes shorter than it is.
Oh, it was too long.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
You don't make a short film that's 23 minutes.
No.
I
didn't know. No. You have to play for the format for the festivals, which they try to do, somewhere between 10 and 15.
Right. You learn that in the process that I was like, oh, my film's only being curated in these, bag of short films, but they were never in front of a feature because it was just too long to be in front of a feature.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're once again going back to this whole ad sales thing. You're working at the IFP, and then you're there for a while, and then you end up with our friend, I think Craig Hitchcock, who
at Variety.
At Variety, and you stayed at Variety for a while.
Yeah, I was there for about 2 to 3.5 years. I don't really recall, but it was great access. It was. And
they sent you on the road too, right?
Yeah, I got to travel. Go to Toronto ahead of the festival, then back for the festival. I could go to all the film commissions east of the Mississippi. There was obviously lots of trips to Los Angeles, and then being in a place like Variety, though it wasn't filmmaking, it was. It was a hub of information, a hub of resources, and between that, at some point, I had done one of those like freelance temp jobs at Miramax for a little while in the publicity department, and sort of sniffed out what that was like, because at the time that was the heyday of like a New York film, and you could really see, oh, this is what a real movie machine works like, with the publicity machine and resources and so I got my window into I got to look into what was going on.
What was going on? Yeah, because
right.
You could see how films got launched too.
Right.
Yeah. So you're at Variety. You continue to work. At what moment did you feel comfortable jumping out of the desk job, or how did that transition take place? Because you did IFP and Variety as a sort of an actual payroll job for quite a while, right? Cumulatively speaking.
Right, and then the money you make, I would make some short films on the side.
Right.
So I was always making short films or writing plays, having one acts put up through some groups at the Ensemble Studio Theater in Cherry Lane, and having this mentor, Mylan Stitt, and working with Tom Noonan. I just learned a lot about, just improving my writing. And so then at some point, this sort of regime change was happening at Variety, and some of the people that had brought me in had all been moving on themselves, and it felt like the right time. And around that time, I'd also just met Jody, who's now my wife, but at the time we were dating, and she was working in television at the time, and she had seen a play or read the script of a play that I had written that had been on stage on weekends for about 6 months, called Union Square, and we decided to take these 11 different one-act plays that were like all monologues and take that and turn that into our first film, so we could sort of learn how to make a feature together.
And how did you scrape all that together? And how did you guys meet? How did you? Was it completely accidental, or is a?
Well, she worked in entertainment, and she was a supervising producer of Shootout with Peter Guber and Peter Bart at the time. And we had just met at a bar, we got connected, and realized we had some mutual friends. But then we just sort of hit it off, and we've been obviously together ever since. Now we have a beautiful daughter.
And you guys work together.
We do. We've been.
What's that like?
Everything you can imagine. It's all the highs and all the lows, but someone that is, we've developed our careers and our shared aesthetic together and learned how to produce together. And she's been an extraordinary partner creatively to me. She's a really, really smart creative producer. Yeah. And then my sales kind of skills lets me used to allow me to just go out into the world and be like, I'm going to go find some money from some random people I don't know in a random city because I heard about some people that might want to invest in film, and I would just go out to like Houston or something and meet with some people and
For real?
and raise some money. And that's how, like, down the road, things like My Friend Dahmer were funded through soft money that way. So
This is a good transition for My Friend Dahmer.
yeah.
I think you told me the story that you went to, was it ComicCon?
Yeah.
Okay, now, so take me back to ComicCon when you discovered, I guess, was that where you discovered the idea that you wanted to do this? Tell me about how this, because this was a pivotal moment for you to make this film, right?
Well, not to back it up too much, but
Yeah.
like as we were catching up the other day, and
Yeah.
after I made this feature with Robert Loggia called Harvest,
Right,
I was
Harvest,
in post, and I said to Jode, we said to each other, I think what would be an interesting movie is something that's a portrait of a serial killer as a young boy. That's provocative. I could take Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, that English major book I'd read by James Joyce, and use that as a template to sort of do how does a young man realize that he's a monster. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. And then simultaneously, we were looking for naturalistic graphic novels. We're not sort of superhero aficionados. And so if I was going to find a graphic novel, it'd be about something much more naturalistic. And so I happened to find myself at an expo that was below New York Comic Con, promoting cameras, because I was about to do a commercial. And when I was leaving, I was like, why is everyone in costumes? And I decided to go in. I didn't realize it was like the preview day of Comic-Con in whatever year that was, 2012 or something. And so I wandered around and was speaking to some of the publishers, and one publisher, Abrams Comic Arts, said, we have this book that no one's seen yet that we're really excited about for next year. And then she pulled it from underneath the desk, and it was an advanced reader copy of My Friend Dahmer. And it was the collision of these two ideas that I had, which was Portrait of an Artist, or Portrait of a Serial Killer as a Young Boy, and a graphic novel, but it was based on a real person, Dahmer. Now, I wasn't a huge serial killer,
You weren't a fan.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of serial killers.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, but I knew that this was the collision of a couple ideas that I already wanted to attack, but even better, it was based on a real person. And I, fortunately, when I reached out, I read it that night. I reached out to the author that night, and he's from Cleveland. And fortunately, Harvest had already been to the Cleveland Film Festival, where it won Best Feature. And so it wasn't like I was too random of a guy emailing, because there had been a lot of people from Hollywood and elsewhere that were interested in his redo of this story of his friendship with Jeffrey Dahmer in high school, because he had done a prior, smaller version of the same story. So
This writer.
the same writer, yeah.
And who was that? I'm sorry.
Durf.
Okay.
And so he had done a cult self-published version of it, and then he was dissatisfied with it because it wasn't as extensive as he knew it should have been. So then later, a couple of years later, he went back and did it correctly, and that larger, more detailed version of their high school days together as friends became this, award-winning graphic novel. And I guess what he realized is I wasn't going to, because of Harvest and my conversations with him, he trusted that I wasn't going to exploit it and just turn it into like a horror film about a guy named Dahmer who's, a monster in high school, because that's not what it was. They didn't know at the time that their friend would become who he became. So that's the truth about his story, is that he was just another one of the kids, like the oddball among their friends. And so he trusted me with his book. And then
How long did it take to write the script?
It took me a couple months to actually get motivated to write it. And then
and you did it on your own.
Yeah, I did it. But, Jody was there through the whole outlining development process with Adam Goldworm as well, which is an old friend of ours, and he's a manager. And so when we showed it to him, he looked at us as sort of character-driven indie New York filmmakers, and he lives in L.A. and bounces around much more in the genre community. And so I knew that this was a collision of those two dynamics. And so the three of us huddled, and I wrote a vomit draft, and then we re-outlined it, and then we hashed it out together, and I kept working on it. And then eventually I had done a movie called How He Fell in Love, and when I was in post on that, someone was sniffing around about the book and found out that I had the rights to it. And then from there, I said, actually, no, I already wrote the script. And so now the script started to sort of float around development offices, I guess, in Los Angeles, and ultimately ended up on the Blacklist. And
Okay, now you explain that to me. I'm sorry, I should know what this is. Tell me what this is. What is the Blacklist?
The Blacklist is this annual end of year survey of favorite screenplays that executives in Hollywood or in the film business have read that have not yet become a movie. So things that are ready to become shot, but they may have actors and producers and directors attached, or maybe in my case it was just the writer and the producers were attached. It's just a raw screenplay that people go, this is something we like.
That's fascinating. See, this is something. I mean, not that I should know about this, but I should probably know about this. I had no idea that this existed.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess for writers, directors, and development execs, that from that point of view.
When I think of the Blacklist, I think of the McCarthy era.
Yeah. So
when I think that you're getting knocked out of the ability to be able to do your craft in general.
No, I'm proud to be on the Blacklist.
And this is like one of the great lists to be on. Yeah.
Well, it was very helpful for me. It was very helpful for me. And that opened up a lot of doors. And it one thing it really did is all of a sudden I met all these wonderful young actors that were interested in the role of Jeffrey Dahmer or the Friends. And I was able to sort of really get a full landscape of all the potential options out there of wonderful actors to work with.
Explain the mechanics behind that. So you're on the Blacklist and you meet all these actors. Is this? I guess maybe the question I have is talent getting attached but not knowing you find out about scripts, right? In a lot of different ways, right?
The reps generally, if they're a young actor, they're going to get it from their agent or manager.
Right. So the agents and the managers are pointing to this, right? And looking at this.
And so being on the Blacklist helped kind of like brand it or give it a sort of a stamp of validation that this is something that, I would like you to read, maybe meet with this director. He's made a couple movies that most people haven't heard of, but this is a cool project. And so I would meet with these actors and try to find who could be the best Dahmer. And in the end, I landed and was very committed to this wonderful young man, Ross Lynch, who was just leaving his Disney show, Austin and Ally, and locked into him as the future Jeffrey Dahmer.
And that
and then you start, just like any other movie, you start to put a package together. You're like, this is our cast. And so eventually it was like Anne Heche, Alex Wolff, Ross Lynch. I had always thought that Dallas Roberts would make a great Lionel Dahmer, the father. And so with this idea, we started to go around and try to raise, financing through conventional channels and also through private equity, which led me down.
Tell me how that worked. I mean, there's so many ways to do that, right? There's foreign pre-sales, there's equity only, there's equity and debt against state programs and tax programs. And so how did you guys put together this, and how, because this was built from the ground up. This was
from the ground up.
Total grassroots capability, right?
Yeah.
And you were represented at the time by an agent by now, or no? Or you did not have an agent
no,
at this point in time?
But I had sniffed around to try to find some representation, but in retrospect, I look back and realize that I had to improve my work to attract that interest. And by making How He Fell in Love, which is a little bit more of a provocative but small indie with strong performances, and when I was finishing that, My Friend Dahmer also became a script on the Blacklist. And so when those two things happening simultaneous, I started having a bunch of meetings with, representation, and have since been at UTA.
Where you are now.
Where I am now, yeah.
Yeah. So nuts and bolts on the financing on that. There was were you guys, I'm sorry, because I don't know, were you guys the producers, or was there,
yes.
Did a producer, so you were the producers as well.
I've produced everything. I think it's kind of like a way to,
because this is, I'm not saying it's always a collaborative affair, but for a director, or especially a writer-director, right?
Yeah, you have to make it happen.
Right, you have to make it happen, but typically you have you at some point you try to find a teammate.
Well, my teammate is Jody.
Jody, and
yeah,
so Jody
and so
does.
we together will start the process. We'll go to our casting director and say, this is something that we're really passionate about. And when Jody starts to really feel like we must make the movie, I feel like then all hands are on deck, because now we're both fully committed to this script. And you need deadlines, I think, to give urgency to everything. So we create some deadlines for ourselves. And with a little bit of a package of talent, you put a little money forward to sort of keep the casting director engaged, to help you, navigate through talent, to sort of help hone in on who are your few top actors that you need for your package, that you can go out to investors. And so these are the actors that want to be part of the movie.
You have to lock down dates and windows as well.
Right.
I mean, it's a puzzle.
It's a puzzle, and you're juggling a lot of things that are not yet locked in stone, but you're having everyone believe that the other side is, moving closer, and everyone's kind of moving simultaneously with the faith that you're going to make it. And so you have to keep your word, because all you have is your reputation. So you got to just find a way to make it. And then the other thing you got to, or we did, is you have a line producer help you do a budget. So you have
of course.
Right. You have to be able to go, this is the real numbers of how to break down the script and how to pull it off. And I was very committed to shooting it in Ohio. So there was the Ohio tax credit that offsets some of the gross costs of the budget. And so you could, in this case, we found an investor who also could better the tax credit financing deals out there by also doing the tax credit financing on top of the private equity, mixed with smaller investments from other private equity investors. And so
no pre-sales, none of that.
No, not on My Friend Dahmer. I've had that happen to the films that happened afterwards.
Tax credit,
yeah, that's it. Just as raw as you could be. It's very old school.
Right. But now I'm thinking, okay, because to me the part of the story, and part of, I think, what makes it interesting, right, for the people who will be listening to this podcast, is that you went from what was basically a desk job at Variety to going out into the wilderness of filmmaking.
Yeah,
and
with odd jobs along the way.
And when you jumped off that cliff, because it was a cliff to jump off of, because you had to stop at some point. How did your life come together financially to sustain this path? Because you made Harvest, How I Fell in Love, My Friend Dahmer, We Summon in the Darkness, Human Capital, all these films, right?
Yeah, I've had a few, fortunately, lately. I mean, there's been a into a new gear since My Friend Dahmer, fortunately, and I would say deservingly so.
Explain that gear that shifted for you. Was it that all of a sudden you could have money that would seed and help you develop something, and you had time between projects to make the next one? How did you receive funds to make, because you had to develop, write, and prep and all of that stuff?
Well, to bridge between Harvest and How He Fell in Love was a stretch of years, which was a little bit of a creative reset. But also I was doing, small commercials, and I had a couple video clients, and I would do these ethnographies around the country where major brands would send me out, and I would interview housewives in their home about their purchasing habits and stuff. And I would do these mini documentaries, and that's
awesome. So that's something you're doing to make some dough.
That's
and to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I did some commercials for Skype and a bunch of other small things. And then the important thing that was also is during this little stretch where I was writing and trying to hone my craft and had these sort of freelance video commercial jobs, Jody was also heading content for a digital agency in New York, a place called Syrup that then became LBI, which then became MRY. And so she was writing a sort of a digital advertising stretch in her career where she was overseeing production there. And, that gave us...
So she was actually doing a job.
She went and did a desk job for a while that, was a stretch, but advertising is its own community, its own beast,
and you were doing some of it yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
from time to time.
Yeah, you got to really fully commit to one or the other, I think, unless you're some sort of like rock star filmmaker, and they're just like, we're excited to have James Mangold on our commercial just to like have our celebrity director here, But otherwise, you got to really be a director that's committed to one or the other, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, for you, you're developing these scripts and doing all that stuff, and you're able to keep it going.
Yes.
And
highs and lows. But.
Yeah, highs and lows. And for you, you have certainly a long passion for being a film fan. You were telling me, what was it? The story you were telling me about Tarantino. The Pulp Fiction story about the...
Just the other day?
Yeah, about the watch.
Oh, that's fine. I was just remarking to you over lunch that we were out in New Orleans, and some of the cast members and I one night were just in my apartment and watching Pulp Fiction again. And I hadn't seen it in a long time. And it just occurred to me how funny Pulp Fiction is, that even this pocket watch that Christopher Walken tells the young Bruce Willis character, I was a prisoner of war, and your dad kept it up his butt for 7 years, and then after that Christopher Walken kept it up his butt for 2 more years, and now it's finally here is the watch, and here it is, son. And so then you go to the story, and there's Bruce Willis. I think his girlfriend has given away the pocket watch to a pawn shop, and so he's got to go back and get it. And then when he goes to get it, he finds himself about to get sodomized in the basement. And it just occurred to me after not watching Pulp Fiction for many years, like, oh, Tarantino made the darkest joke, which is just stay away from that watch, because every time someone gets close to that watch, something goes up your butt. that was
your like at home laugh on that.
Yeah, random. But it was, I was just praising how Tarantino, I think, is extraordinary, and as we all know, and just has a great sense of humor.
Talk about that. Talk about influences, not about necessarily watches going up your butt, but about filmmaker influences. Tarantino is one of your heroes,
lately,
right? Yeah.
The influences, I think, change whatever project's in front of me. I'm like, what are the filmmakers to aspire to or look as role models that I think are cousins of whatever I'm working on at the time? So I was a big fan of, obviously, any independent filmmaker is, of Cassavetes, and the ambition and the way in which he finds ways to cultivate great performances, but also make you uncomfortable and force you to look at something in new ways, and the entrepreneurial nature of what he's done or what he did. Olivier Assayas, if I'm saying his last name correctly, I don't think I have, and his cinematographer, Denis Lenoir. I really locked into Late August, Early September early on as this wonderful, beautiful French film, and that helped me inform writing the script how he fell in love, and a sort of a shooting style that was quite like is very lyrical and airy. With We Summon the Darkness, when I had the storyboard artist, we were referencing Kubrick and how he framed those characters in Clockwork Orange, and that's expressed sort of in the storyboards and in the shooting of how I framed, Alexandra Daddario, Maddie Hassan, and Amy Forsyth as these badass heavy metal chicks. I remember with Human Capital, I started when I was working with Liev. I was like, oh, we have not as many days to shoot as I had hoped to express everything I wanted to do with the camera. But I started watching Michael Clayton, and it was just a reminder of how much you could create by just keeping an amazing actor in a medium shot and just staying on him. And because I realized that was completely possible with Liev after, as we all know, he's an incredible actor. And after 1 or 2 days of working with him, like half the shots I thought I might need to express a scene I could do by just staying on his face. There's always guideposts. Right now I'm in the edit room on All My Life, and I find myself saying to the editor, what would Billy Wilder do here? Like how would we cut through the scene in a really swift way to keep it going? And so I'm always just sniffing around any and all filmmakers as inspiration, and almost looking for permission sometimes to just sort of do something that I know is possible. And not that I need another filmmaker to show me the way, but it's just like, yeah, you always can learn from all the movies. And I remember once, I don't know, I went and saw some panel at Lincoln Center, and Spielberg was speaking. I guess he was about to have, what was that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio? What was it called when he's the con artist on the run? Catch Me If You Can. Yeah. And he was saying how, he doesn't do it anymore. He doesn't need to do, but it's wonderful to just turn the volume off on a movie and just watch it without the dialogue. Just like how do you just watch a movie with completely silent, just to watch the pictures, and you can almost figure out the entire movie the same way. Mm-hmm. Which then goes back to something that's fundamental to me, having started in ad writing, which is don't say what you see. So and you can't just have the dialogue say exactly what you're seeing at the same time, or it's just kind of like too on the nose. Which then links to like working with Tom Noonan, who was very much inspired by the playwright Harold Pinter when he was teaching me, which is like how do you cultivate what's implicit in the scene so that you give the actor room to act, because what's been established as the conflict between actors in a scene is it doesn't necessarily need to be said. They could be arguing about something other than what they're about to go do, but where they're headed is something that's completely already defined in the conflict of the movie, and it gives the actors room to sort of talk about anything. Talk about, I don't know, the example that comes to mind now is just in Tarantino's movie Pulp Fiction, just how they're about to go harass some people and talking about Royale with cheese and Big Mac and Burger King, but they're not talking about, while we go over there, we're going to go rough up these guys. There's a way to keep the conflict implicit so that the dialogue can sit above that. And the roots of that, I think, are in work like plays by Harold Pinter, so it's all, I'm reaching all over the place for influences, but it just is, finding permission to just be as creative as possible, and not be obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
And for you, jumping out of, like, when you made Harvest, or even going back to when you did something as bare bones as Approaching Union Square, you're working with a very small independent footprint, and then all of a sudden you now burst into anything that you want. You need a crane, you get a crane. You need a helicopter, they give you a helicopter. What's this transition been like? Because it's been pretty sudden, hasn't it?
It's been great. I mean, I look at every movie as being like, oh, each one there's a little bit step further into more resources and more time, more confidence. I feel like with the first movie or two, you're just like, how do I go make a movie? And then at a certain point around How I Found Love, it was like, oh, these are my tools. How to express myself. I'm expressing myself. And then with each one, there's just a few more resources, like a camera operator who's also a steady cam. So you're actually finding a way to make the camera work more fluid on My Friend Dahmer. And by the time I just did All My Life, you have the support of a studio and a budget and an amount of shooting days that allow you to, if you can think up an interesting way to express yourself with the camera to maximize what's possible with the scene, that there are the resources there to provide for it, rather than sometimes with an indie, unfortunately, you have to go, well, what's the proxy reduced version of that idea that I can pull off in not enough time? And so that's been a wonderful new experience to have as a filmmaker, that we need some more scope. Well, man, we'll bring in the helicopter and film this car going over a bridge and turn that into a beautiful moment of cinematography. Or, a crane shot to sort of, start high and lower into a scene.
The scene.
Yeah. And just each one has been a baby step forward in more resources, and thank God for that.
And you work with you're literally doing constructing the whole process with composers and collaborators. Talk a little bit about working with music and who you do and who you've worked with. I rarely talk with anyone about that, and I think that would be interesting to hear what you've done with that and how you've done that. Yeah. And how you work out. Well, actually, you had an example recently that you just told me about working with Tariq, wasn't it?
Tariq Anwar, yeah.
Yeah, and there was an issue with music,
right?
And you had to find a way to get around that, and you.
Well, I'll start with a positive.
You stripped out the music in order to get back to it. Right,
you had to. Right.
Talk about that.
Well, with him, Tariq Anwar is a renowned editor that came in to cut Human Capital. He likes Thomas Newman and the score of Thomas Newman, so he cuts with Thomas Newman's score and sort of sees a movie and footage through that lens and that tone. But there was a certain moment where I was like, that's not what the score is, and we need to completely pull all that score out and see the movie for what it's worth without it and work from there. But I will just say that I can't keep a beat. I have probably the worst voice in America. Music is something that I am a fan of but can't do myself. And so when it comes to something like that, it's not my skill. I really have a expanding interest in all kinds of music, from rap, rock, alternative, world music, and so I'm
freeze on that around. Freeze on that moment. You're shooting a scene. You're shooting a sequence, right?
Yeah.
Do you sometimes think about the music that goes with the scene when you're imagining the scene?
Depends on the film.
Or does the music go way at the end?
Depends on the film. So, like How He Fell in Love, I looked at Late August or September by Olivier Assayas, and he used this Ali Farka Touré, this West African musician, and I just love the way that music played underneath at the time a contemporary Parisian story, and I just was going to do something similar on this like small little New York indie that I did with Matt McGorry and Amy Hargraves. So I knew I was going to go into edit with the inspiration of Ali Farka Touré and found a composer that could cultivate some New York musicians that worked with those instruments from West Africa. And I felt like that was something I knew in advance. My Friend Dahmer, we were going to go find the deep cuts of punk rock from the 1970s coming out of the Cleveland era. And I met a lot of those Cleveland,
hardcore
punk musicians and the music that the author had listened to, and use that as a jumping off point and try to found the playlists that were on Buzzard Radio coming out of Cleveland in the 1970s, and sort of did our best within our budget to find as much of that music. And so we saved some of the most important part of the music budget to make sure that the prom scene had real prom songs. And so the other songs were, cheaper 70s songs, so that we could really make the prom hit with music that you totally remember and, relate to. Every movie, with Harvest, we collaborated with Duncan Sheik and David Poe, and we kind of pointed to Simon and Garfunkel as kind of a model for how to use score and song as coming from one person or a duo like the two of them to create an EP at the same time as create a score with songs by Duncan Sheik and David Poe for that movie, because somehow we felt that there was an acoustic guitar kind of vibe that felt right for that film. Each one kind of leads you down a different road.
Path, yeah.
With All My Life right now, it's about what are going to be the songs, hopefully, of 2020 and 2021, and that and other musical influences, because the resources on music there are obviously larger than indie.
Right. You have more to pull from.
More to pull from.
Yeah. So, and also like other departments, working with the production designers and with everybody.
Yeah.
Because you have to.
Hopefully,
it's the building blocks. Yeah.
It's building blocks. Hopefully this doesn't sound pretentious, but I look at being a director a little bit like I get on a raft and go down the river, like Huck Finn or something. And you start with your like village of development and you work your script out, but then you go down the river and you stop over and you make a movie with this like village of circus community to shoot a movie. And then you take the movie and you go down the river and you sit with an editor and you collaborate there. And then he gets on the raft with you and you go down and bring the composer on and the sound designers and then you journey. And at the end of the river, you just sort of let the movie go into the ocean and hopefully go into, the awareness and the minds of people you don't know. So it's just sort of this like Huck Finn journey of traveling and collaborating with various people along the way. So I feel that's the one thing I really like about being a director is the constant collaboration with different people that are all experts, very focused in their own different crafts along the way. And I get to be, a partner to hopefully get the best work out of all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm, starting with the actors, they're incredible human beings. And for me, that's one of the most thrilling parts of the process is to collaborate with them.
Actors, especially now in the theater at Cherry Lane and Ensemble, when you were working there going back in time, were you were writing plays,
yeah.
but you were also directing? I don't know much about that period of time.
No, it's just writing.
You were writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I never took to
directing theater.
Yeah. Just didn't. I might have tried it on a one act or two, but I don't know. I like the collision of a camera, the science of it, and actors and sort of meaning to get something that pops on camera, and more so than trying to block something for stage. It's just somehow I'm happy for somebody else to sort of take it from there if it was a play. But also the thing with theater for me is that you care about something and you put it up. Not only are you not making any money or just enough to regenerate the play to keep it going, but unless you're successful enough to have like a Broadway or off-Broadway play, which wasn't really the case for me, but then it goes away and then people are like, oh, sorry, I missed it.
Sorry, I missed it.
So then I was like,
hang.
Yeah. And so, a short film, it's like at least if I met somebody 6 months later, I was like, can I show you this thing I worked on? I could give them a DVD of it.
Right.
And that sort of, and just sort of focusing what I cared about towards movies was, I haven't really written a play in a while, but I think that doing all that work at the Ensemble Studio Theater and with Tom Noonan was like going to the gym every week.
It's a discipline.
Yeah, every week I'd be working on trying to write something new or further something I was working on that was larger, and once or twice a week putting it in the hands of some actors and just sort of putting it on stage. And
it was also something that you had to do where you were doing something fueled from passion but not getting paid to do it while you're doing it. You're doing that parallel. It's your other life with anything else that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
which is incredible discipline to be able to continue to do that.
Discipline and desperation.
Desperation?
Go
ahead.
Yeah. Just had to, if you're constantly unsatisfied with what it is, you keep plugging away at it to try to get it better or try to reach for like a larger opportunity or a larger palette. So, but, just to try to better my craft as a writer and understand the dynamics of drama to sort of figure out how do I keep 5 minutes interesting on stage. Then can I do 10? Can I do 15? Can I do half hour? And at a certain point, after I had a bunch of one acts that were, performed at various theaters, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Milan Stitt, where I would once, this is going back, but I like every weekend or every other weekend, I'd go to his apartment in Chelsea, and there was a small group of like adult playwrights, me being the youngest at the time, and we'd gather, and he was, a distinguished mentor, teacher, and playwright himself who would gather with these adult playwrights and kind of help them, improve their craft. And
so like Tom Noonan, he was a coach for you, a mentor.
Yeah.
Important mentor.
And the fundamentals that I picked up from them really still hold true in the way that, currently in the edit room on something that I still look at the scene through that same lens of breaking down, how do you set up the conflict and the dynamic at the top of every scene, so the audience is clear about what's happening. That allows for the actors to have, and the dialogue to have the room to, act and keep it as implicit as possible, so that we're engaged in the power struggle, the energy exchange between actors in a room, or in a scene, and how that develops. If it's two people, it's like, one fundamental thing that still holds true that I got from Tom Noonan,
yeah.
it's just, two characters, A and B, in a room. A says something that B makes B want to leave the room, and then as B starts to leave the room, A says something to keep B in the room, and then B says something to make A want to leave the room, and then A says something that makes B want to leave, but then B comes back in the room and make A want to leave. It's just that simple. It's like playing scales. And so then as I look at a scene, it's like, how do I develop that sort of tennis match of energy between two actors in a scene that may or may not have enough conflict on the page? So I need to sort of find a way to block that kind of dynamic and add that to the scene to kind of give it more action, more blocking. And then if a third character, character C, enters the scene, that changes the energy in the room too, and those fundamentals just still hold true when I'm rehearsing before we shoot a scene, and also in the way that you try to reconstruct a scene in the edit room. It's just like breaking it down that way.
And how do you hold on to, because you've been a writer, but you've also had to work with the scripts of others now.
Yeah, which I like a lot.
Which you like a lot. How do you, what's your disposition during your process of allowing the actors to deviate from the script, and are there moments where it's necessary?
It's moments that are necessary. I think because I'm looking at it dramatically, there's a difference between spontaneity and improv. Improv sort of generally falls flat. Spontaneity can contribute to the scene. But sometimes you use a little bit of improv to have the actor sort of find their way to something that's going to contribute to the scene. So sometimes you use that in the rehearsal to sort of stretch the muscles of the scene and sort of figure out what may be possible. But there should be a dramatic through line, and every scene and every sequence in a movie has to have a purpose. It has to have a reason that it exists that's singular, and from the beginning to the end of that stretch, the characters should be different, or there's no change. If there's no change, then why are we sharing this scene? So you're trying to find a way to push characters through that that transformation, either very small or obviously on the larger palette of a whole story or a whole act, the same thing. And so I'm always sketching that out, sort of understanding their journeys. And so spontaneity, I think, is more, and keeping an actor relaxed and loose and having fun is more important than going, hey, look, if you improv, maybe we'll stumble on something interesting. That's not my...
That's not your game.
That's not my game.
Right.
Yeah. So when actors say, oh, Mark gave me a lot of space, it's like, I didn't really give you space to make stuff up. I gave you the space to feel comfortable as the character so that you continue to find where the scene is supposed to go.
Right.
It's almost like a director sometimes like a goalie, and you just like kind of knock away the bad ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You've got to keep the course.
Right. And then the last part of that is when you're in the mix, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, get that out of the mix. That's not working. That's extraneous. You're always kind of like just...
You're eliminating things that are extraneous.
That are bumping you, yeah.
Right up to the end.
Right up to the end. And then you're like, all right, time and money is done, and hopefully I get to go to the top of the river, get on another raft, and go down again.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about going way back now, but this is before you're in college studying
This is your life for somebody you've never heard of.
That's right. We're exploring Marc Meyers, man. Yeah. I mean, you jumped into this and did it from the standpoint of your journey and an exploration to get to the point where you could start to direct. But if you go back in reverse, what was it like at home with your family? Was there any seed that with your mom, with your dad growing up that would have led you to even imagine that you'd be getting into this madness?
I mean, I had done a lot of school plays and stuff like that as a kid.
You acted. Yeah.
Yeah. And then finding permission to write is like something you have to emotionally grant yourself to, for me, like, oh, am I going to put out into the world in college an editorial column every other week other than just hand my teacher a term paper? And that was maybe the biggest transition from writing diaries or things for myself to going, I'm going to write a column. I had this column in college called Fried Green Education, where I had guaranteed that I would smoke a joint and then write a column. So it was just like, oh, they got to read like
what you would write when you were high.
Yeah. Here's
Right.
just a random idea while I was stoned in college, and you get to read it in the college newspaper every 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, that'd be fun. And then I'd walk through campus and be like, people were like, dude, I like your column of things. And I had a radio show, so I enjoyed every Monday morning turning on the radio station and having like a 2-hour radio show where I got to play some of my favorite music, and I would interview random characters from the college community, like the bar owner down the street and things like that. And I just started to explore putting myself out there outside of school.
Right.
Right. I went to an acting camp when I was I was in high school, and I was always acting as a kid. My dad's a tax attorney, so I don't think he could even write a paragraph to express himself. That's not. But my mom is the complete opposite, and I had a lot of support of doing kid plays when I was in middle school and things like that, high school.
Were you an athlete as well, or
Yeah.
you were able to mix all that together?
Yeah, I might have been one of the fastest Jews in Westchester at one point. No, I was on the track team in high school, and my soccer team. We went to the state semifinals. Played soccer my whole life.
Fastest Jews in Westchester.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that. I'm going to write that quote
Just for a
down.
small stretch. No, we went to the Penn Relays. I was on a 4x4 relay team, and I was the captain track team. And I was in high school. I was an amazing set of athletes were a year older than me. And so when I was a junior and they were seniors and we had been playing soccer for a very long time, there were a lot of great athletes a year older than me. And so that they kind of carried our team to the state semifinals, where I then saw an opportunity in a game against Hewlett, Long Island, where there was an offsides trap and everyone was going to get caught in it, and I ran through it and the ball landed at my foot and I had an open goal and I missed the open goal and we lost to Hewlett, Long Island 1-0 in the state semifinals. And the only thing come out of that beyond complete humiliation and what my dad called was the shot heard around the county was that it turned into my college essay. Just how my life would have been different if I had made that goal.
I love that.
And it still haunts me. I was like, I can't believe I missed that goal.
Little moments.
Yeah, little moments. Yeah, I've always been playing sports.
That's good.
Yeah.
So in terms of your next steps as a filmmaker, are you always with a pile of a huge pile of scripts and ideas that you have that you want to explore?
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the stuff that you can't really talk about what you want to make in the future. That's the problem. Yeah.
No, you can't. But I will say that there are ideas that were bigger than me, so I'm trying to get to them through the steps of other movies. So hopefully there's some ideas that I've written a while ago, and hopefully
they're larger films.
The larger films that are larger in scope and ambition, but I couldn't be someone who had made How He Fell in Love and said, this next thing you should do is this, or even My Friend Dahmer. It's like one by one. Hopefully, I can progress towards those, or like stories of adventure and size and scope, and then also I someone asked me, what are you looking for? And my answer is really just a great story. If it comes from me or it comes from somebody else, and wherever that story may take me, hopefully. That's
right. Now in the case of when we think about the launching point for you with My Friend Dahmer, that was a genre that's extremely popular, which sort of fits into the, I guess, a bit of the true crime world.
There's a way to tap into a loyal audience there.
Right. Talk about audience and that audience.
Well,
and what it is about that audience, because each one of these stories is for an audience, a specific audience.
That's the first time I ever had a movie that was part of any kind of genre community, and for me that was hilarious and fun and invigorating to sort of have something that brought me into this really passionate, supportive genre community with sort of a character-driven thing that they could think is part of the genre film. That kind of, does that sort of, I don't know if that answers your question. But,
no, it does. It does. No, I mean, because it when you think about what that world represents, I mean, I don't know, Discovery ID, right, is like a channel dedicated running around the clock with just true crime stories.
Right. So like genre, true crime.
For this.
Yeah, they're passionate. They keep wanting to find more to fulfill that, true crime fascination. And so Jeffrey Dahmer is just one of those characters that keeps on giving, I suppose. People want to learn more about this.
Many of these stories, Summer of Sam, all of these stories, right, are all about.
But that plays into the fact that I think we're all fascinated by the dark underbelly of our psyche. And here is someone where he's 100% become that dark side of humanity. And it's safe for us as hopefully, responsible citizens to sort of look into the lens of that dark part of our humanity through a character like Dahmer. Or somebody else.
Or somebody else,
right.
Yeah.
And so that... And also that's really fun to direct an actor that's going through that process, because I look back at some of the things I whispered into Ross Lynch's ear between scenes, and it's just messed up. Just like to help him stay in that mindset of trying to be a kid in high school who in his head has a desire for things that are far beyond what are normal, but he's still just sitting in the class.
Fitting in,
trying to fit in, trying to relate to his friends, and it was a wonderful set of qualities as a director and an actor to play around with that helped then inspire some wonderful cinematography with a point of view, and to then go into the edit room and find a way to assemble that film that sort of expresses his devolution as from teenager to monster, and what that did. I mean, it's just the dark characters are fun to explore. But then I'm right now in the edit room on a love story.
The opposite.
It's right, but there are some devices that still, there are lessons I learned in that edit room with My Friend Dahmer that I, just by the more that you're in the edit room, the more times you can pull from previous experiences on ways to look at a scene and break it down, or just, it's a tragic love story. So there is a downfall in that relationship that, how do you express that in the edit room? That sort of like sliding from hope to hopelessness. And how does that inform the pacing of the movie in the second half? Things like that.
Tell me about Human Capital. I know very little about it.
Right.
Yeah. Tell me about the story and how it came about. Because it looks like it's about to come out, right?
It's about to come out.
Okay, so that's exciting. Onto its own.
Its own.
So
it'll have its little theatrical moment.
Tell me about that too. Is this? I don't know anything about the campaign for the film and where it's going to end up. Does it have a theatrical window first?
It's a day and date situation.
Day and date, okay.
Right. So after TIFF, it got picked up by Vertical Entertainment and and DirecTV. So DirecTV has its own like prior exclusive window, and then
so it'll go out day and date theatrical
on March 20th.
On March 20th, and streaming or cable or whatever.
All the things to follow.
All things to follow.
And then it'll be in Europe and elsewhere through other distribution channels and stuff like that.
Right. It's got full distribution. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the movie. I don't know anything about it.
Well, it's the first time in a while I've spoke about it, but it's based on an award-winning book called Human Capital. It's about a decade old. It became an Italian film when an Italian director wanted to adapt it and apply it to his own culture in Italy. So this is sort of the return of taking the same ideas of that story and returning to the American landscape with which the story is, originally set in the book. The screenplay is by Oren Moverman, who's just an incredible person and also an extraordinary screenwriter. And I remember calling him at the end of every day and be like, your dialogue is just so delicious. Just so much fun for these actors to play around with. But it's fun. What I really fell in love with the story when Jody received the script and from Hardy Justice over at Maven Pictures it's messing around with time too, and it's a movie that's about class and the loss of community, and it dissects a bunch of people that are all at the same banquet table. Liev Schreiber, Marisa Tomei, and Maya Hawke, and they're separate stories that intersect before and after this banquet, and how they are loosely connected to a hit and run, and how they all react differently to preserve themselves in relationship to this sudden accident, this hit and run of this waiter from the banquet who's been run over by a car.
And how do the people at the table connect to the hit and run moment?
So Liev Schreiber's character is a real estate broker, like a local real estate broker, who's trying to invest in Peter Sarsgaard's hedge fund. He's married to Marisa Tomei. Marisa Tomei's son, who's also at the banquet table, is believed, and it looks like, and is probably the guy behind the wheel because it's his car that hit the waiter who happened to be waiting on them coincidentally at this banquet. And so it starts before the banquet, brings you to the banquet through Liev's character, and then how Liev...
So the kid who was hit was one of the waiters at the banquet that was hit by the kid of one of the guests.
Right.
Okay.
So they're all loosely connected. Exactly. And so
Crazy.
But yeah, it's great.
it.
And what's wonderful about it, and working with Tarek in the edit room too, is like what I loved always about the script is the non-chronological order with which this story unfolds. On that level, it's also about empathy. It's also about, in Liev's story, Marisa Tomei is kind of a supporting character. In Marisa Tomei's story, Liev is kind of a supporting character. And so it's how they view the other person through their own experiences, and how you don't really understand what they're going through because you only see them, other people, in passing. And that's how I think we all in our own lives are. We have these assumptions about what are the trials and tribulations of another person's life experience. But if you were in their journey, you might better understand where they're coming from. And so that is sort of expressed through this film that is in non-chronological order. And so that dynamic of that also the sort of the form of the film was also part of the meaning of the story. I really fell in love with that idea too. Yeah.
And so that's how it unravels. It unravels scenes in advance, the banquet.
Yeah, it'll be a story through Liev's journey, and then a certain point, upon the arrival of the detectives at his doorstep, it then goes back to the beginning again, and it goes through Marisa Tomei's journey up to a similar benchmark moment in her experience before and after the same banquet.
Wow.
And then again, it explores that same timeline through Maya Hawke's character. And at that point, sort of all three stories converge in this film's like sort of denouement.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
And I've not seen How He Fell in Love. What?
Join the club. No, I mean it's out there on iTunes. It was on Showtime or something. But
these things happen.
They happen. Yeah,
they
I
happen.
Understand.
Tell me about this film and what you put into it, and then I'll go home tonight and watch it, of course.
Yeah,
and we'll talk about it again.
Well, Jody and I were trying to get that made after Harvest for a while, and then when we were pregnant with our daughter, we realized let's not play around anymore with trying to make it bigger. Let's just make sure we make it before the baby's born. So during the second trimester, we
So it was a race to get it.
it was a race to get it made. That was a deadline. We got to make this movie before the baby comes.
Fantastic.
So then in the we were filming over March or April of whatever year that was, 2013 or something. And no, 2014. I should know that because my daughter was born. But
listen, it's hard to keep track of these dates.
Right, but it is a film about an extramarital affair. So it's about a young man who meets a married woman at a wedding that he connects with. They're both there on their own, and she's there on behalf of her and her husband, and they hit it off. And then he finds her again in the city, and they start to just immediately connect and start to squirrel away in hotel rooms together and sort of connect outside of their own separate lives. And so it's how this extramarital affair really brings them to separate places. So they find true love with each other, but it's not one that they can really explore in the real world. It was a way of exploring love through like a different lens, and make something with a little bit more.
Well, the challenge of monogamy, right?
The challenge of monogamy, but also just the challenges of falling in love with someone you can't be with, but maybe that relationship doesn't destroy you, but might in the end make you even better. And that's kind of what we were playing around with in that film. Make you better as a partner, as a person, as an individual. Yeah, as an individual. That they are, in the end, I look at these two characters and they're stronger and they're better people at the end of the film than they were at the beginning because of the time that they spent together. And you were joking before about how this is available. It's available if I want to see it on iTunes. It's on iTunes and all those other digital channels and stuff. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that premiered at the Los Angeles Film Festival, and then it I don't remember which network it picked it up after. Oh, it did after that. Yeah, so it was playing on cable. It might have been Showtime, I think. I think it was Showtime. My Friend Dahmer was on HBO after its theatrical release, but they're all like on iTunes and Amazon. But did My Friend Dahmer had a window? Yeah, that had a theatrical window. Yeah, that had a nice indie theatrical run for I think it was like November to January or something like that, and it just stuck around. Yeah, and it's still what's thrilling to us is that it's still on the iTunes charts in the horror and independent film charts. Like it continues to sell. It just continues to. There's always going to be an appetite for a story about a serial killer. People dig it. People dig it. Yeah. And for you, it's funny. I mean, you talk to veteran filmmakers who've lived through the theatrical era and the streaming era, and everyone's adapted, and it's not really that big a deal. Everyone sort of tries to look at everything as part of the changes in our environment. But for you, when you're making a film, any of these films, are you always considering the idea that what you're going to be playing is not necessarily going to be a large screen experience, or are you always making? Well, in the case of course, your current project, it's theatrical. That's obvious. It's being made by a studio, but all of them, you came out of the box with that idea. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm looking at everything with the idea of what would it look like on a big screen, which I mean, in the most fundamental way is like what is a close-up if that head is 20 feet tall. You don't have to be as close in a close-up as if it was on a television. I'm always thinking I'm making a movie that's for a movie screen. And hopefully, and they all have found a way to... they're all going to have festival showings. But they're all going to have a festival showing, and all of them, fortunately, have had their own theatrical experience right afterwards. Harvest was thrilling for us because that was my first, film after Approaching in Square that was chronological. It was with Robert Loggia, Barbara Barry, Jack Carpenter, Peter Peter Friedman, Ari Gross, and it played film festivals for about a year and was theatrically distributed and had a New York Times Critics Pick review that really just, to me, showed the power of the New York Times.
What was the budget on Harvest? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was like $400K, something like that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So from 400K, we get to, let's see, All My Life, and now all of a sudden it's 30 million.
A little less than that, but it's also, it's a studio's small movie. But for me, it's a little movie for a studio, but for me, it's a wonderful, wonderful window into what's possible. Yeah.
And you were able to shoot the current project in 50 days, 40 days, 30 days.
What did we have?
Probably 10 weeks or 7 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I finished right before Christmas. We started on Halloween. It was like, I think it was like 35 days, and
nice.
It was nice. When
you
get
the time.
When you have a call sheet and you're shooting 2 pages that day is much different than an indie where it's like you have to shoot 6 pages a day and be wound up the whole day trying to just
to get it done every day.
And you're sometimes not getting every scene. But then even you get in the edit room on anything where you didn't make your days, but you still have more than you need to tell your story.
You pack more in the bag than you need for the trip.
Yeah, but what's crazy is that We Summon the Darkness, which Lionsgate and Saban are putting out, and that comes out in April.
So that's coming out this April.
That's coming in April, right?
Tell me about We Summon the Darkness.
That we shot in 16 days, and that had pyrotechnics. 16
days?
It was the craziest 16 days of my life.
Wait, how is that done? Did you shoot in one location?
Well, yeah, we shot about two-thirds of it are around a house, like a hero house, and where all of these characters gather over a course of one night. So there's no real costume changes going on because it's all over the course of one day into the following morning, and it's just 90 minutes of chaos. And it's my first experience with pyrotechnic stunts.
Tell me about that.
It was awesome.
Tell me about the pyrotechnic stunts.
Well, there are these 2 characters out of Montreal that came, because we had to shoot in Winnipeg, because of the tax credit financing, the benefits of bringing
west of the Western Canada.
The Canadian prairie.
And I've heard little bits and pieces about how that works. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
You have to use local crew, right?
Local crew.
Right.
I had a wonderful cinematographer, Darren Anderson, out of Los Angeles that I had met. She came in with her camera operator, who's a Steadicam guy as well. But besides that, everyone else was outside of the producers that were, like Jody as a producer with on the film with a bunch of guys out of either London or Los Angeles. But everyone else on the set was a Canadian crew. And they were thrilled to be not making a Hallmark movie, I'll tell you that,
I can imagine.
But there are these 2 characters called the Blood Brothers out of Montreal that were the practical special effects guys. And they're
called the Blood Brothers?
They're called the Blood Brothers. And
all right, and stop right there.
And they're like magicians.
Tell me about the Blood Brothers. What? Well, what is the Blood Brothers?
If you drink whiskey for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, your voice is going to be really raspy like the Blood Brothers. Those guys were total characters. I love them. They were fantastic. And
they love being in Western Canada where they could do that all day. No,
I think they're doing a lot of work across Canada and elsewhere. But these guys, whatever they were doing on my film was nothing compared to what they are capable of. But in this story, we had stabbings and blood coming out of necks and out of stomachs and fire and girls jumping through candy glass from the 2nd floor of a house, landing in a big, that's more of a stunt coordinator's job, but in the big, mattresses and stuff like that.
So they do blood,
fire,
disaster. Glass breaking,
explosions, and also the basic atmosphere stuff. But they were just so fast and just always there with whatever the request may be. Because sometimes you're planned for it, but other times you're like, what would really be great? And they're like, we'll be right back. And they'd come in and they would pull off some little special magic trick to make, the scene that much more colorful.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. It was a great wild ride with Daddario, Knoxville, Maddie Hassan, Amy Forsyth, Logan Miller, Austin Swift, and Kian Johnson. Yeah, that's a heavy metal flick.
Heavy metal.
Yeah.
And these guys get to use their skill for stabbing, blood, glass,
Yeah.
fire.
When I read that script, it was after My Friend Dahmer, and fortunately they thought of me and I read it, and I was like, oh, this is, from a filmmaking point of view, a continuation into the genre form in a way that I've never done before, but it's almost where Dahmer leaves off. Like the Dahmer film leads up to his first murder, and then this one is just full of
Just nonstop murder?
well, just a lot of it.
A lot of murder.
It's three girls. There's this cult documentary called Heavy Metal Parking Lot that's on YouTube. And it's this guy that in the 80s had done a documentary, interviewed people in the parking lot of like a Judas Priest concert. And so it's a wonderful inspiration for this very smart script by the screenwriter Alan Trezza. And it's three girls are, during the satanic panic of the late 80s, go to a heavy metal concert, and in the heavy metal parking lot, they meet three guys, and they go to the concert with them, and then afterwards they invite the three guys back to Alexandra Daddario's house, and you think that the boys are bad, and then it just gets, and then it has wonderful twists in it that just carry you through, and lots of props that were hard to keep track of when I was filming. Like, who's got that knife? Just like, who you got to leave that knife there because the other scene, this other character's got to pick it up later, and it was just wild and bloody and fun and spontaneous and
how do you get in the mindset for that? I mean, right? Because this is a script that you were given, right? You didn't write this script, but you dove into this script with all of the energy needed to be able to pull off the chaos of it all and bring order and shape to it.
Yeah, it's just fun. It was just fun. I mean, I read the script. I gave it to Jody. I was like, what do you think of this? And I just watched her read it and laugh out loud. And I was like, yeah, that's what I thought. It's funny and it's fun. And so one of the first things I did was sort of take out this sort of self-aware wink wink kind of dialogue that was in the film and kind of keep it in my style of being more authentic to what would it be like if three girls had this agenda and they were not that good at it. And I don't want to give away too much about the movie, but that sort of, to do a movie that was fun, like that was let's make a movie that's just fun. That was fun, refreshing. It was fun to do every day.
So this comes out in April.
I think April 10th.
April 10th.
That's Good Friday, right?
And I guess I don't have my calendar.
Don't ask the Jew in the room. I think it's April 10th.
Yeah, me the same on that one. So that's going to be coming out, and it's going out theatrical and day and date as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's
the plan. And
that's the way of the world.
And they've given you the amount of cities that you'll be playing in. It'll be playing in around the country, or do they tell you about all that, or do they just sort of say this is the general strategy?
Well, I think one of the fundamental basic rules of day and date is that it has to get premium placement on TVOD, which is transactional video on demand,
which is what this will have as well.
Which is one part of what day and date is the ability to buy it wherever you are in the country, from wherever your living room is. Right
on.
To be able to have premium placement, I think one of the basic rules is it has to be at least in 10 cities at the same time. So you're sort of starting there. I think that there's a wonderful opportunity for We Summon the Darkness to just, hopefully, like Dahmer, just stick around on sort of the iTunes charts and stuff. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And
three beautiful women at the forefront of it too. So.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, cinema and beautiful women are meant to be together. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then just loads of blood and stabbing and craziness.
Yeah. And some funny jokes along the way, and Knoxville's just great.
Hilarious.
Yeah, he's great. Nicest guy. Yeah.
And will you tour with it? Do they have a budget for that? Will they send you out on the road to talk about it at all, or to meet to show up anywhere for it, or is that not a film where they'll do that?
No, they'll do that. I mean, it's playing some film festival this weekend, and then when it comes out in April, I know that I just got some emails about a bunch of podcasts in the sort of genre community that will be sort of the screenwriter and I will be on in the lead up to its release, and
right,
I'm
to
also
start to market.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm working all my life right now, so that's
your primary.
That's my 100% focus.
When does that open?
I don't know.
You don't know. Right. Because that doesn't have a date yet. You're finishing it now for the studio. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just keeping my head down, making the movie and doing the best I can on it. Yeah.
Well, it's fantastic. It's huge.
I mean, Approaching in Square, which was based on a play, the first thing Jody and I did together we'd shot on weekends. It was like 11 different short films. Each weekend, it was a different cast. The main character from each of those short films all happened to be on the same New York City bus together. And that was the first film, which was based on a play I wrote. That, we took a Canon XL1 or Canon XL2 camera and some other Pelican cases full of gear, and would throw it into a taxi every Saturday morning and go to a different location with a different cast would meet us there, and we would shoot an interior scene with a few characters. And we had 11 different of those short films that then thread together to become Approaching in Square, which, so to go, oh yeah, we're just trying to figure out how to make a movie with that and a budget of maybe $10K or something. And so it's nice to have more resources than that and not to just go to set in a taxi cab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But apropos of the structure of that, we were talking about other examples of that the other day, where like Night on Earth for Jim Jarmusch, The Cab Ride, or the
Coffee and Cigarettes had just come out.
Right.
Right.
So these are like also examples that inspire the idea of threading together shorts.
Right. Or giving you the permission as a filmmaker trying to figure it out, going, oh yeah, it's possible. I may not have at that point, or at any point have the sort of community or the cachet around someone like Jim Jarmusch, whose films I love. So there's something with all of the wonderful celebrity actors that come through on something like Coffee and Cigarettes that bring such excitement to this unique film of his. But when that was available and I saw it, we were prepping Approaching in Square, and I was like, yeah, it's possible. We can do one too. That's a movie made of vignettes.
That aspires to that.
Right.
Yeah. And it's funny. I haven't seen, and I need to see the film Harvest that you made.
Mm-hmm.
The inspiration for making that film was what for you?
Well, I was.
How did it come about?
Well, I was my own grandfather. One summer, the whole family knew that he was going to pass away, and he was a World War II veteran, and at the time, I just would go. I was working at the IFP then, out of college a couple of years, and on weekends I would go back up to Connecticut, where he lived his whole life, and I would be there on the weekends, and I would sort of journal my observations about how all the family members were sort of handling his final summer in very different emotional ways. So then when that had passed and I had found myself back from that main film and television workshop 1 week exercise, I stopped home at his home on the way back to New York and happened to be alone in his bedroom, and the hospice nurse had left with my mother and my uncle at the time, left the room, and I happened to be alone with him, and he was holding my hand and he passed away. He raised his head, he looked me in the eyes, squeezed my hand and died. I was just, rattled to the core. And then I just had to go back and be like, I got to try to write a screenplay that kind of goes to that moment. And then,
Wow.
and so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so then you kind of create as a filmmaker a movie that you believe in so much because you personally have to go do it, that sometimes you're blinded to, does the world want to see this? I'm not sure. And it's a well-told story, but what I learned from making that was, maybe you have to, as an independent film, make a movie that's not just well-told, but provocative at the same time. Now, it really did play really nicely with, let's just say, the flyover states, but sort of in the tastemaker community, I think, of the world in which we live in New York and Los Angeles. It might not have been cool enough of a film, but Stephen Holden of the New York Times gave it a great New York Times pick review that really helped give it a nice launch in its theatrical window after its festival play. And that was a movie just of pure heart. And it was one that I felt like I almost felt like I couldn't move on until I had made that movie. And that's the way I look back at it. Like I had to go through that one.
Because this is right. This is after you do your first, which is the Union Square project, right?
And it's like, and you learn from that. You're like, that's that. We learned how to make a movie. We put ourselves through the workflow, the mechanism of shooting a movie, going through post and everything else, putting out in the festivals, having like some international festival experiences with that, and cultivating. I think the Sundance Channel bought Approach Union Square, and so you had from A to Z experience on that movie with a bunch of actors who I had known through sort of the New York theater community. And then from that, it was like, we have to make a movie that's chronological, not just vignette in nature. And by doing Harvest was to do almost our first conventional independent film together, Jody and I. And in the process of doing everything from raising the money, finding all the locations.
How'd you raise the money for that?
Well, it was New York, right? I mean Connecticut, right at the moment when they were about to start their Connecticut tax credit program.
You shot in Connecticut?
We shot in Connecticut, in Madison, Connecticut,
okay.
Where my own, mom's family and my grandfather was from. So when I wrote it, I was writing it with real locations in mind. So in many cases, I shot in places I had written for and had to find a main house that was somewhere near and larger than a family house that my family had. Like, it's just a small, modest house, but to find one larger enough for this like larger family story. And the premise there, just as a tangent, was like, what if my younger brother who was in college had to come home for the summer and thinks he's only visiting but gets stuck there for the summer because the grandfather's passing away? And what is that relationship like for a college kid who's faced with the final summer of his grandfather, witnessing what his mother and two uncles may be going through separately, and his grandmother with Alzheimer's? How are they all aware of and handling the loss of this World War II veteran who's the grandfather, the patriarch of the family? So it was written with these real locations in mind, and the Connecticut tax credit was a burgeoning opportunity in Connecticut, and that allowed Jody and I to cultivate relationships in Connecticut through people excited for the idea that independent film might be rising in Connecticut. And through, yet again, like other movies to follow, we went and sat down with lots of random characters in Connecticut that were excited by the opportunity of a movie written for a place in their state. And we
all private equity
learned how to,
and you were raising it from multiple individuals.
And
Fantastic.
do the business plan. You have the advice of your production attorney to set up the investment plan so that they're all Class B investors, meaning that they have an investment stake in the film, but they don't have creative oversight of the movie. They're basically entrusting us to make the movie. And
which is wonderful. That was the ideal relationship with the investor, of course, not always the case.
Right. Ideal for them, or ideal for us, not ideal for them in the fact that they may not make their money back. But, you had to, barrel through with the faith that it could. And the cast felt wonderful. And I think everyone's proud to have been associated with that movie that we pieced together. Then, there's the Connecticut tax credits. So there was a day where I remember Jody had we had gotten everything organized so that you could, how did this work? You could sell your tax credit in the state. So there was a day where she had gone, and we needed that money to continue the budget for post. And that was the plan.
The idea is that the folks that are able to do that will give you anywhere between 80 plus cents on the dollar
Exactly.
as an advance, and then they bank it at the end.
Right. And so
and
the
make their
Connecticut
profit.
The Connecticut tax credit had, or Connecticut Film Commission had approved and given us a certificate for a certain value off our Connecticut expenditures.
Right.
And she had gone on the train up to Stanford, met a guy on the platform that was part of this company. And
This is accidental, or is
no, on purpose. Like it was
yeah.
arranged. It was something all part of the plan. And that was the day with which she handed over the certificate to him in exchange for his purchase of that certificate so that he could bundle that tax credit as part of his financial plan or whatever.
Right.
And she came back with a large enough check for us to, I mean, it was all prearranged and worked out with agreements that we had the money to finish post. So we went into filming with not all the money, but enough to get us into the first couple of weeks of edit. Yeah.
Right. So you didn't have all of the money for the entire offline editorial and the finishing.
Exactly.
Right. And then you were able to pull that together from this piece, or?
Exactly. And then finish off the movie. Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you actually did, you did that, because sometimes it's done in advance. So you did this after you wrapped.
You had to with the Connecticut one.
Because they had to know what your spend was, the guys that financed it.
No, like something like We Summon the Darkness.
Because sometimes you do it up front, right?
Yeah, there's pre-sales. But that's based on the value of the talent attached.
Right.
They're like, oh, this is a movie where we'll put this amount of money forward because we like the cast. And then that money is, provided as part of the what you have to shoot the film.
Right.
That
becomes production financing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or one piece of it. Right.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting to have heard about some of these things when I was younger, and then ultimately go through it and see them play out on a project that I'm a part of.
And now, after all my life, the hopefully the next project's all studio financed. So that would be the goal.
It'd be wonderful. Yeah, I mean, if it's a great story that you have to live with a story for like 2 years at some point, and you want to be proud of it and have. If I didn't write it, when you write something, you find your way in. There's a couple books that we have and other scripts that I've written where you're emotionally attached to it and you believe in it before you even put your pen to paper. But if you get a script, I've come to realize it's a little bit like an actor. It's like, how does an actor, if it's not for a huge paycheck, or even if it is for a huge paycheck, you have to engage in a story because you must explore that character or must explore that story. So hopefully in the future, I find stories that I must do. Like I just must have that experience. And I learned that from the actors, like how they align themselves with projects. It's like it's partially just purely an emotional thing that they must go through. And so the same thing happens if I find a story. I'm like, I must explore this.
And sewing this all together with you and your partner and wife, Jody.
Yeah. And our daughter now, too.
And your daughter.
Who's ridden a dolly track and been to a bunch of sets and had her name in the special thank yous. We're all very proud of that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's adorable.
So you're immersing her in your movie business life.
Yeah, I'm happy for her to have gotten a window into that.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's great. But so much of this anchors with what I like to call the convergence of art and commerce, right? I mean, those are the collaborations, right? That are producer, director, writer, artist collaborations. That is you and Jody. Mm-hmm. But is there, or have there grown other players that are involved in this journey with you to make it possible for this producing to happen? There's not a company, or is there a company, or how is this all?
We've always had a
You've always had your company.
Yes.
Right, but there's not an engine or another set of producers that follow your path. You guys do it yourselves.
Yeah, each project
Which is
has
an amazing story.
It is,
You know?
I guess.
I think it is to a great extent. I mean, when you think about
we don't have some patron behind us that's kind of enabling us to have an office somewhere to set up and do our business. Like each project has fueled us to kind of make that one happen. And then from that, you try to cultivate more opportunities. Yes. I mean, there are arrangements out there where there's people that do have, you know, a founding patron or founder of the company that is very wealthy and provides for that, you know, that office and that resource. We don't have that
for the linear path that you have to construct, really, right?
Right.
Because that's the challenge, right?
Yeah, it is.
And now, okay, like as an example, you finish All My Life, right? Which will happen not that long from now, right? How many more weeks? Like another 10 weeks, 8 weeks?
Yeah, I think, you know, somewhere at the early summer would probably be the likely delivery of the film.
And you constantly have to be thinking about the next thing while you're doing that.
Oh, yeah.
What's that like for you?
Try not to think about it. How about that? Just trying to keep my head down into this one. Do it.
I love that, but I mean, because I think about that in my own work life.
Yeah,
you know, about that next thing and how you pour your energy into the current thing, which you have to. I'm on a project now that I'm working as a post supervisor, but I'm constantly thinking about what's the next gig, and have you explored beyond the feature world? Have you explored any television ideas? Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, we're developing a few television ideas. I mean, I feel like everybody's developing television ideas now. You know, it's the gold rush and the arms race of streaming right now that everyone sees that there might be somewhere out there for someone to make a TV show. So yeah, of course we have a few TV ideas. And I'd love to do some television. I'd love to.
Have you been called in to do any directing? No, not for that. Not for individual episodes.
Well, I haven't been even available to explore it because
you've been so busy.
I've done 3 movies back to back to back, and that was after Dahmer. So it's been back times 4, back to back. You know, and I would love to jump on a movie to do this. You know, late summer and in the fall again. The challenge with shooting anything in the fall, though, is that it gets dark at 4:00, and you're just like, ugh, I wish I had more daylight.
Right, exactly.
I've had a few of those experiences lately. So, but even so, I mean, yeah, television is something I'd explore. I'd love to do a pilot or develop a show, or come in and do some episodes of something that pushes me creatively in ways unanticipated.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's quite a process.
It is.
I mean, because I've seen the work that people put into the series Bible, and it's become very sophisticated. They make like bound books, and
I know. Yeah, I've done a bunch of lookbooks for projects that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just put on this. Well, one way
it's
to do
like
it.
The sales deck.
Put on this. Yeah, it's like a sales deck. You put on the stereo in my apartment, and I surf the internet looking for images from other movies and other photography out there that may represent what I think best communicates what this movie could be. Sometimes you pull other movies together into some sort of sizzle reel to create a mood reel that suggests what this film or TV show could look and feel like, to give others a window into how you envision the final product. And all of it's hypothetical because there's so many challenges that are going to hit you along the way that you've got to just problem solve, see your way through, which all feel like part of the way in which it contributes to what your actual end project will become, is, you know, the scars and the good ideas of the journey of making the actual thing. But it's all hypothetical at the start.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw back to one more story that I left out, and it's an important one. Ira Deutschman, who was a guest on one of my podcasts. In fact, he was my first guest that I actually had a sit down with. And you somehow ended up working with him.
A little bit. Or working near him. Yeah.
Near him? Oh, so it was not with him.
Well,
at
no, with him.
At Emerging Cinema. Tell me about
Emerging
that
Cinema.
story.
Well, so I was at Variety, and when that regime change switched, and I'd spent a little time at Broadcasting Cable, and I was like, this is not for me at all. Like, the only thing I cared about at Variety was being around the film community. And so when that switch happened and I left that office, Variety, I was looking for something else to do in the independent film community while I had the plan to go make Approach Union Square with Jody. And so during the week, I would go over to Emerging Cinema's offices, which were at the time
The Duart Building.
At the Duart Building.
Yeah.
And would try to help them sell sponsorship to support the independent cinema network, the program,
yeah,
and cultivate those relationships. And Ira Deutschman's always ahead of the curve in regards to distribution and the ways in which movies can reach people. And I felt that was an exciting and enlightened concept to how do you take over through digital cinema other venues that are like museums and other organizations that might have a screen.
What they refer to as the non-theatrical world.
The non-theatrical. Yeah. Ironically, after I made Harvest, I think that film in part was brought to some cities through the Emerging Cinemas Network.
How interesting. So you collided back.
Or it might have been the next film. But either way, or both, I don't... It might have been Harvest and How He Fell in Love, but... So I saw him and his two partners and met some friends through that office that I'm still friends with that were all also taken by the ambition of Emerging Cinemas. And so for...
Because it's another revenue stream that's out there that doesn't fit with all of the other aspects of normal distribution through theaters and through streaming.
Right, and how do you bypass the gatekeepers that are theatrical bookers who determine what movies from what distributors reach the cinemas like Landmark, the Laemmle, the Angelica chain, City Cinemas, and other groups of cinemas that are out there around the country that show independent, foreign, and art films. And then things like, if you look at like Alamo or the Nighthawk, they're doing a mix of like big films like a Star Wars movie mixed with the sort of niche community films, like a Spectrovision film with Nicolas Cage, like Color Out of Mind or Mandy and things like that. They're all coming through something like the Alamo. So where do other independent films maybe have a venue to reach its community? And through at the time, the mailing lists and the community that's built by museums and other non-theatrical venues was a wonderful way for other films to find some audiences. And so I thought
and can continue to play after they're gone.
Right. Or just not
and
run
play
into
for the first time as well.
And not find a theatrical booker or the strength of competing with larger distributors as the only way to then reach people on a movie screen, but to go through something like Emerging Cinemas opened up an opportunity for a lot of other independent films. And there's, and then I think Day and Date started to sort of, and the like now in which we sort of can get our movies through digital so quickly that there's other challenges or other resources that allow the movie to find people in any part of the country and beyond. So, but there's something about Emerging Cinemas that I think was ahead of the curve. Like how do you bypass some channels to reach the audience?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's cool. It was cool. So I did that as a way to keep me busy during the week while I was
once again
planning Approaching Square and shooting that on the weekends. Yeah.
This has been fabulous. A survivor, as you are. You are a survivor.
Well, thank you. That's nice. So are you. We go back. We've had many a drinks together. Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. It was good. Great hanging out.
So much.
Thank you, Charlie.
All right, bye.
All right, cheers.